Two political parties have so far declared donor funding in their submissions for the fourth quarter, the first financial year since the implementation of the Party Funding Act was concluded at the end of March 2022. The Electoral Commission of South Africa observed that these were the lowest declarations in value and pointed to a few emerging trends. Joining us now to outline some of those trends is IEC's Chief Executive for Party Funding, George Mahlangu. Good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. First and foremost, I mean, if you look at broadly the first, second, third, and fourth quarter, is the legislation reaching the aim for which it was intended, and how do you measure that, right? Because you decided you want to regulate based on, of course, the outcry from political parties and the courts having looked at this, the private donations to political parties to curb the buying of influence and to bring about some improvement in transparency and accountability. Are you reaching that point?
Good evening, Tavo, and good evening to you viewers at home. Yeah, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to share with you our views on what we have evidenced since the implementation of the Political Party Funding Act. As we said in our press release, that Q4 is the lowest of them all. I think what we have seen in Q1, we had seen fewer political parties. There was an increase in Q2. But in Q3, I think, which was informed by the preparations of the local government elections, we've seen a spike. And now that the local government elections have gone and passed, we've seen only two, declarations or disclosures from the political parties that are represented in these two legislative houses. I want to believe that there is some improvement as the members of the public have got an idea who's funding who. And there is some element of transparency that has resulted as a result of this legislation. Whether this is doing sufficiently or not, as the Commission, we can't say, because in the past, political parties didn't, disclose and declare who's funding them. So we don't have a comparative analysis as the previous information was not known. We can only comment about what we have seen since the implementation of this legislation.
Yeah. So there's a set limit in terms of sources, in terms of size of the donation, in terms of what the donation of the funds is used for. Have you seen a degree of discipline on the part of the parties to the degree that, as the public, it should restore public confidence in the party system?
Look, we rely on political parties to disclose what has been declared to them. What we have seen, from the public domain is that political parties are complaining that these thresholds are a hamstrung, and the maximum of the 15 million per annum is too little. But the civil society, on the other hand, is of the opinion that the 100,000 minimum is too high. So when you look at the two, political parties have the opinion that this must be increased because they are not receiving the donations that they are expecting. But the civil society are saying actually the 100,000 is too much. The entry level should be anything above 20,000 or so, as an example that other political or other civil society members and groups are saying. So it's chalk and cheese from these different two parties, which is the civil society and the political parties.
Yeah.
So as the Commission, we are implementing the legislation. I can't say 15 million is sufficient because we've never ran any political party. Yeah. We do not have an idea how much does it cost to run a political party. Yeah. But from the transparency point of view, I can safely say that if Thabo is going to vote in the next coming elections, Thabo will vote knowing who's funding who, which is something that in the past we didn't know who's funding who.
Right. So are you saying it will not be the work of the commission to bring about adaptations to that? There's one big political party that is saying, as it goes to its conference, one of the things that they're going to have to discuss is the inhibitive nature of the political party funding act, in them, of course, raising funds for their own organization. So this would then be work, I suppose, that once again would have to go to Parliament before you would need to do anything about it.
You're correct, Thabo. We can't correct the legislation with our regulations, and that's called ultra vires. The legislation has got its strengths and its weaknesses, and we have picked that one up. Now, as a commission, we can only develop regulations that will implement this legislation with its weaknesses, and we can't take it as a commission for amendments. So the members of the public, Thabo, or a political party, or any member of the civil society can take this legislation for review or for amendment. For an example, right now we're doing training to unrepresented political parties. What is unfair to them is that they are not receiving money from the public purse, but the legislation expects them to appoint auditors. And me and you know that auditors are not coming for free. And if they haven't received any donation from the members of the public, how can they afford to pay for an auditor? And if the bank account has nothing in it. So the legislation requires them to do so. So it's a weakness on the legislation itself. But we can't go to unrepresented political parties and say, don't submit, the financial statements. It is the requirement of the legislation to do so.
Yeah. Let's look at some of the trends then. Is there a presence of foreign agencies funding a lot of the political parties? Are you picking that up?
The only political party that has received quite a number of foreign donations is the Democratic Alliance. Actually, they did so on quarterly. In each quarter, there's a donor by the name of Frederick Newman Foundation that will donate, to Democratic Alliance. However, this donation has got a specific use, which is policy development, training, and skills development. And we have satisfied ourselves that this money has been used for that purpose, because the supporting documentation has been submitted to us proving that this money has been used for what is intended for. And there's a maximum of 5 million per annum for foreign donations for that particular purpose that I've just alluded to. So we have satisfied ourselves that in aggregate, all these donations that have been received from this particular donor, because it's a single donor, hasn't exceeded the 5 million mark, which has been set up in the legislation.
Yeah. And do you see the other trend that many people would have want clarity on is that there are, for example, parties or maybe even individuals who are dependent on one rich donor who gives them money and as opposed to getting their money from many supporters?
You see, that is the information that will make you and other members of the public to look at this thing closely. That why there is a close relationship between this donor and this political party. Meanwhile, we've got a multi-party democracy fund that is a money that is meant to deepen democracy. So if a particular donor chooses a particular political party of his or her choice, then you begin to ask, the discussion will ensue, in the public that what is this? They will begin to look at this closely. Otherwise, in the past, that no one would have, had this kind of information. That can we look at this relationship between this donor and this political party? What is it that is bringing them closer? And those who are interested in doing investigations, they will go and dig further But in our case, as long as the donor meets the annual requirement in terms of thresholds, we do not have the power to go and dig why there's a relationship between this donor and the political party.
Yeah. You've mentioned something really important here, the Multi-Party Democracy Fund, which is really meant to ensure that all parties receive at least to some extent an equitable share of donations. Are contributions coming into the fund?
We are somehow disappointed, because we expected that this fund will receive quite sizable amount. The reason why I'm saying this is that actually political party funding, the unit itself, it's meant to feed off from that fund because we are allowed to charge a 5% administration fee. So meaning that if we had to live on the multi-party democracy fund, probably our salaries wouldn't have been paid, by now. But what has been received to date since the beginning of the financial year until the end of March, it's just shy of 5 million. And this 5 million came from a single donor. And then there was another 5,000 and there was another 2,000. Basically in total, it's about 5,012,000. So since the beginning of the financial year, this multi-party democracy fund has seen only 4 donations, 2 5,000, a 2,000, and a 5 million from one of the telecommunications company, which is Vodacom in this case.
A quick 30 seconds one. Would you then therefore encourage political parties to rather encourage their donors to put money into this democracy fund, and that would be a better way for them as opposed to access their equitable share?
One of the donors said to us, if I put money in a multi-party democracy fund, it's going to benefit a party that I disagree with its manifesto. So the question was, why must I put money in the multi-party democracy fund if there's a political party that talks to me in terms of its manifesto? I might as well go in there. It's a pity that it is reality that donors are going to choose political parties of their choice. However, the multi-party democracy fund was going to be an ideal, and it's a first of its kind. We scan around in the world. There isn't, a fund of this nature because it promotes, transparency. And the unrepresented political parties are complaining that this fund is not going to work for us as well because we do not have seats. So it's what is good for the geese is not good for the gander, when you look at represented and unrepresented political parties, and at the same time when you look at represented political parties and the civil society groups.
Well, Mahlangu, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That was George Mahlangu, CEO of the party funding at the IEC.